is a perfect correlation. As you improve health, within half a generation, the population growth rate goes down. There is a concrete example for this. Morocco is a young nation. Over half the population is under the age of 25. Almost 1/3 is under 15. This is a recent development. In the year 1971, when child mortality was high and life expectancy was low, Moroccan women had an average of 7.8 children each. But with big and sincere strides in improving water, sanitation, healthcare and women's rights, the baby boom is winding down. The average number of births per woman is 2.7 and population growth has dipped below 1.6%. So, water is one example of interdependent phenomena. The solutions to all challenges are similarly stacked, and toppling any one of these domino sets off a positive chain reaction, which is why we should start believing that abundance for all is closer than many suspect. Technologies today are poised for exponential growth. What do you mean by exponential growth? Exponential growth is just a simple doubling. 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, and so on. If you were to plot this growth on a graph of any technology, any given technology, because most exponential curves start well below 0, well below 1, say at 0.001 to 0.002 to 0.004 to so on. On a graph, these plot points below 0 will look like a straight line. To reach 1, it takes 13 doublings. But only 7 doublings later, we could have skyrocketed to more than 100. It is this kind of explosion, meager to massive and nearly overnight, that makes exponential growth so powerful. But with our linear brains, it is why such growth is not readily understood and can be shocking. One example of technology unfolding exponentially is this. The Osborne portable computer was released in the year 1982. It weighed 14 kgs and cost a little over $2,500. Compare this to the first iPhone released in the year 2007, which weighed less than 1/100th as much at 1/10th the cost, while sporting 150 times the processing speed and more than 100,000 times the memory. This is apart from a universe of software applications and wireless connectivity that puts the iPhone light years ahead of early personal computers. In terms of money, the iPhone is 150,000 times more price performance than the Osborne. This is an example of exponential change at work. When it comes to a solution to water, it is not any one technology. Rather, it will be a combination of technologies, built for a combination of needs. One of these needs is disaster readiness. Even in the developed world, the relief systems are no match for the devastation of earthquakes, tidal waves, and tropical storms. When the Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans in 2005, it took 5 days to get water to refugees in a camp who were sheltered in a Superdome. An English engineer, Michael Pritchard, had witnessed the disaster caused by Katrina and the Asian tsunami. He found that safe drinking water was in serious shortage. This drove him to develop what is called the lifesaver bottle. That's a trade name. With a hand pump on one end and a filter on the other. The bottle does not look very high-tech, but the filter is unlike any other. Membranes, researchers in nanotechnology work at minuscule scales where distances are measured in atoms. 1/1000th of a meter is a nanometer. That is their baseline in their parlance. The lifesaver can remove in seconds everything there is to remove. Bacteria, viruses, cysts, parasites, fungi and other waterborne pathogens. One filter lasts long enough to produce 1,000 liters, 6,000 liters of water. And the system automatically shuts off when the cartridge expires. This can certainly be made into a larger version for a family's use now. With 40% of the Earth's population living within 100 kilometers of a coast, it's the combination of nanotech and desalination that holds even greater promise. Certainly the majority of the world's 7,000 or more of desalination plants rely on thermal desalination or reverse osmosis. The former means to boil water and condense the vapor. The latter feeds water through semi-permeable membranes. We do not need both these solutions. Thermal desalination consumes too much energy for large-scale deployment, and the brine byproduct fouls aquifers and is devastating to aquatic populations. Reverse osmosis, on the other hand, uses comparatively lesser energy, but toxins such as boron and arsenic can well sneak through, and the membranes are said to clog frequently, reducing the lifetime of the filter. Point is, there are dozens of nanotechnologies currently in development that will impact water. And for every amazing nanotech solution, there are mirroring developments in biotech. For every biotech solution, there is a water recycling solution equally as exciting. It's not the development in the water space that may be the answer, but the beta technologies that surround the water space. Then we have a problem of sanitation. The credit for the invention of the modern toilet is given to Sir John Harington, who invented a water closet in 1596 for Queen Elizabeth I. In the East, innovation stretches back further. Archaeologists recently unearthed the Han Dynasty latrine dating to 206 BC, complete with a running water supply, stone bowl and an armrest. So this 2,400-year-old Chinese technology looks downright modern, and that's the problem. When it comes to our indoor plumbing, not much has changed. But imagine the potential upgrades. Imagine toilets that require no infrastructure, no pipes under the floor, no leach field, no sewer systems running down the road. These high-tech outhouses powder and burn the pieces and flash evaporate the urine, rendering everything sterile along the way. Rather than wasting anything, these toilets give back packets of urea for fertilizer, table salt, volumes of fresh water, and enough power that you can charge your cell phone while taking a crap or answering a second nature of call, as they call it in this parts. Now, should the need arise. In these toilets, tie these toilets into the smart grid, and the electricity can be sold back to the utility company, marking the first time in history that anyone has been paid to shit. Now, as a final component, do all this at a cost of a few rupees a day. That would not be a mere upgrade, it would be a revolution. It is also the goal of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation program. There are many universities which are being funded to help bring toilet technology to the 21st century. Top scientists are working at it. While in the developing countries there may be no toilets at all, leading to disease and death, in the West, three-fourths of the water bill is towards disposing waste and running the sewage treatment plants. The goal is to solve both problems, to find a way for people to go to the toilet that does not involve running water or sewage, while still rendering human waste completely harmless. It does sound like fantasy, but no magic is required. Lowell Wood, an astrophysicist with a background in thermonuclear fusion, computer engineering, X-ray lasers, and one who was involved in Ronald Reagan's Star Wars missile defense program, says, You can burn the fecal portion of the waste and use that energy to completely clean up the urine, turning it back into water and solids. There is over a megajoule per day of energy in human feces, which is enough to do everything the toilets need to do, with plenty left over for cell phones and lights. And we have the technology already. We can literally do this with off-the-shelf parts. In addition to feces and urine, this techno-toilet processes all organic waste, including table scraps, garden cuttings, and farm refuse. Thus closing all the loops, providing a family with all the water they might require. Then we have food as a problem. According to the UN, 925 million people currently don't have enough to eat. That's almost 1 out of every 7 people on earth. The children are the most visible victims. Each year, 10.9 million children die in developing countries. 1 out of 3 children shows stunted growth, resulting from malnutrition, iodine deficiency. Iodine deficiency is the single leading cause of mental retardation and brain damage. Lack of vitamin A kills 1 million infants annually. This is where we are before the world's population balloons by billions. Over the past 100 years, agriculture has mainly been a brute force equation. In the West, first farms were industrialized, next food was industrialized. Food production and distribution systems were backbone with petroleum products. In the result, it takes 10 calories of oil to produce 1 calorie of food. In a world facing food shortages, this alone makes the process untenable. Irrigation systems have pumped reservoirs dry. Major aquifers both in India and China are almost gone, resulting in dust bowls. Toxic herbicides and pesticides have destroyed waterways. Modern fishing practices are another part of this brute force equation. Bottom trawling destroys about 6 million square miles of the seafloor every year. That's an area the size of Russia. According to estimates by international ecologists and environmentalists, as reported in the journal Science, at the current rate of exploitation, the world will run out of seafood by 2048. Writing about Punjab region in India, which was claimed to have been transformed by the Green Revolution from begging bowl into a breadbasket, the well-known environmentalist Vandana Shiva points out, far from bringing prosperity, 2 decades of the Green Revolution has left the Punjab beset with diseased soils, pest-infested crops, waterlogged deserts, and indebted and discontented farmers. The challenge going forward is to replace this unsustainable brute force with a considerably nuanced approach. If we can learn to work with our ecosystems rather than run roughshod over them, while simultaneously optimizing our food crops and food systems, the potential is infinite. The question of how to improve our food crops rests on the debate whether to adopt genetically modified crops or not to. In 1996, there were 1.7 million hectares of biotech crops in the world. By 2010, the number jumped to 148 million hectares. This 87-fold increase in hectares makes genetically engineered seeds the fastest adopted crop technology in the history of modern agriculture. Hence, there may be no stopping the GM foods. Over the past decades of research, many of our GE fears have been quieted. Health concerns appear to be a non-starter. Millions of GE meals have been served. There is no case of GE-induced illness. Ecological devastation was another worry, but all GE appears to be good for the environment. The seeds do not require plowing, so soil structure remains intact. This halts erosion, improves carbon sequestration and water filtration, and massively reduces the amount of petrochemical inputs needed to grow our food. Herbicide use is also reduced. When farmers in India adopted BT cotton in 2002, the nation went from a cotton importer to an exporter, from 17 million bales to 27 million bales. It increased the yield by 50% and reduced pesticide use by 50%. The income was phenomenally high. Right now, we have the first generation GE crops. Soon we will have versions that can grow in drought conditions, in saline conditions, crops that are nutritionally fortified, that act as medicines, that increase yields and lower the use of pesticides, herbicides and fossil fuels. The Gates Foundation aims to take cassava, one of the world's largest staple crops, fortify it with protein, vitamin A and E, iron and zinc, lower its cyanide content and make it virus resistant and storable for 2 weeks instead of 1 day. By 2020, this one genetically modified crop could radically improve the health of 250 million people for whom it is a daily need. There are issues with GE because no one wants to see a few companies in charge of the world's food supply. So who owns the seed is a real concern. But this too won't last. There is already a call for an open source movement for GE crops, and it is a matter of time for these issues to be answered. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN estimates that agricultural production needs to double by 2050 to keep up with population growth. During World War II, the US military was having trouble feeding itself. There was also a distribution problem. The troops were spread out all over the world. The obvious solution was to grow food locally. Wherever fertile soil was not available, the US military started building large-scale hydroponic facilities to grow food in a nutrient-rich solution, no soil. In 1950 alone, the Army's hydroponic division grew over 4 million kilograms of fresh produce. We are talking about World War II. After the war, most people forgot about these successes. The food production went back to the soil. The Green Revolution occurred and the hydroponics was further sidelined for petrochemical solutions. There was only a trickle of research. In 1983, Richard Stoner made a major breakthrough, discovering that it was possible to suspend plants in midair, delivering food through a nutrient-rich mist. This was the birth of aeroponics. Traditional agriculture uses 70% of the water on the planet. Hydroponics is 70% more efficient than traditional agriculture. Aeroponics, meanwhile, is 70% more efficient than hydroponics. Thus, if we use aeroponics for agriculture, we could drop water use from 70% to 6%. With water scarcity looming large, it is hard to believe that these technologies haven't been widely adopted. A professor of Columbia University, Dixon Despommier, explains, it's a PR problem. When people hear hydroponics, they don't think NASA, they think pot grower. He, along with his students, had brainstormed about growing crops on the rooftops of New York's buildings, and were dismayed to find that by their estimate, if they did that, they could feed only 2% of the New Yorkers. Then came the idea of growing crops in abandoned buildings, or the idea of vertical farming was conceived. Vertical farms have astounding advantages. They are immune to weather. So crops can be grown every year round under optimal conditions. 1 acre of skyscraper floor produces the equivalent of 10 to 20 traditional soil-based acres. Employing clean room technologies means no pesticides or herbicides, so there is no agricultural runoff. The fossil fuels